Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, in Oriental perspective, it was also something very interesting. The Oriental perspective did not want the recession to take place. They felt if you consider the vanishing point, then there is a chance that the object that is placed farther back, that will appear so tiny that you will hardly get to see them. So, what their challenge was completely different. They felt that everything has to be prominent. So, what did they do? It was more like an alteration. Instead of making a vanishing point, they did just the reverse. They just avoided the vanishing point. They made all the lines that is otherwise, like all those lines that are supposed to meet into a point, they just played their own role, because it's finally the artistic freedom that you are provided with. Fine, as an artist you can do something different, because it's already created and you are recreating it. Fine, we discussed about all these things earlier, that you are recreating life here. So, what they did, they made all those unparalleled lines parallel. So, you will never see the horizontal lines which are not parallel there. So, in this perspective, if you see a person sitting here, and another person sitting further back, there will be no scale difference. So, maybe for example, if you have a tree that is close to you, another tree that is farther back from you, they will also look the same. So, that is how you see in Japanese or Chinese perspective. And there is another variation that is called the isometric projection. Now, this isometric projection is more common in architectural drawings with a purpose, because sometimes you may feel that the farther area should not look smaller, and in fact, rather that should look larger. So, you use a reverse perspective. You put the vanishing point at the foreground, and instead of putting them elsewhere, you create another area where it just works in an opposite order. So, if you have a design like this, it is very interesting to create things with your knowledge, that if this is a building, it will just follow a reverse order. So, this part you will know should be this big, or if it is slightly larger than this, then it should follow this order. So, this is another variation that is known as isometric projection. So, this is basically at the foreground, which is smaller, and the background, if we feel like to just take a transparent view of it. So, this is how it should be. So, the background is larger. So, this is more like when you are creating something in a reverse order. So, you join these points and what you get is a shorter foreground and a larger background. So, I hope it is clear to you. Now, you can play around with different kind of perspective, but do not forget to try cubist perspective sometimes. So, there is another variation when we do not really depend on a vanishing point, but we try to give it a atmospheric feel that you know, we create an atmosphere which is not as perfect as following a vanishing point, putting all the horizontal line that meets in one point. So, that is one way of looking at it, but we can also give it a atmospheric effect. And what is that atmospheric effect? We call it aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective, because when we want to make a change into the ambience. Now, how to get that? One way of doing it is like making the foreground sharper and background hazier in a gradual manner. It is more like how you perceive things. We go by our common sense perception, common sense of observation, and we also operate things with a sense of value of color. So, you perceive color in terms of their value. Now, it is more like, you know, if it is a high value color, that means it is a lighter color which is full of light like yellow, white or so, it has a tendency to come close to you, close to the viewer. And if it is a cooler color, that means a low value color, it will always have a tendency to go farther back. So, if you want certain part to be pushed back a little bit visually, because we are creating the illusion of space, if you want some part to be pushed back, we must go for cooler color. So, our choice of color should be like, you know, indigo blue or cerulean blue, cobalt blue, purple, light blue, even some bluish green will do. Whereas, if you want to place some color that will like you want that color to come close to you. So, you are pulling that particular object towards you, or you want it to be pulled towards the viewer. So, for pulling to bring it close, we go for warmer colors like red, orange, light green, light fluorescent green, yellow, also some you know, lightish pink or this kind of color. So, this is how we create the atmosphere, that you have warmer color in the foreground, cooler color at the background. The foreground is sharper, the background is not so sharp, rather hazy, and also middle ground we create some kind of a graduality, that it just creates that kind of a volume and it gives you the sense of atmosphere. This is also very important and we use it in different contexts. So, that is called the atmospheric perspective, when we do not have a particular notion of where to make things disappear. So, like let us realize it with this two small diagram that I produced for you. One is like you can see the warmer colors in the foreground and the cooler color at the background. You can see the artworks of Paul César. That is a reference I would like you to see, to spend more time looking at César's painting, and you see that he tried to simplify the whole being into geometrical planes, and he just on the with the support of this warm color, cool color, he could create a spatial depth in the landscape that he produced all his life. Now, this is another example where I made the foreground sharper. I used a sharp black, whereas the background I used some light gray, so that it goes farther back. And now, I made a butterfly also, where you know it is more sharper. So, it is not very difficult to make out that this is placed somewhere at the foreground, and this is the background, and this is the middle ground. Similarly, for this painting, this is the foreground, that is in the background, and this is perhaps the middle ground. So, this is how we can make use of aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective in our painting to get spatial depth.